meeting
Recording
to order.
in progress.
Deputy City Clerk Kevin Christian, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Dondekar,
Here.
Commissioner Hopkins,
Here.
Commissioner Khan,
Here.
Commissioner Wilkin,
Here.
Vice Chair Quincy is absent. Chair Jorgensen.
Here. Thank you. So let the record reflect that commissioners are present through teleconferencing. I'd like to remind my fellow commissioners and staff to help us reduce background noise by muting your phone or microphone unless you are speaking. The first item actually will be the Pledge of Allegiance. Michael Hopkins, would you read the pledge for us?
Yes, definitely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So first item is public comment. And at this time, we'll hear any public comment for items not on tonight's agenda. Items raised are generally referred to staff, and if action by the commission is necessary, may be scheduled for a future meeting. You would follow the instructions on the screen if you did wish to speak. Deputy City Clerk, is there any public comment?
Let's give the attendees a few seconds to review those instructions. I'll give you them verbally. What we'd like you to do is raise your hand if you're an attendee and you want to speak on an item not on the agenda. And then if you raise your hand, I will call on you and move you to a panelist to be able to use your mic and your video. With all that being said, nobody in the attendee audience has raised their hand.
Okay, well, we have no minutes to approve, so the next item will be public hearings. And there's a general statement I want to read. Any court challenge to the action taken on public hearing items on this agenda may be limited to considering only those issues raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the City of San Luis Obispo at or prior to the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please give your name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you. So we'll move into item 3A, the first public hearing, 3580, 3584 Bullock Lane. And we have a draft resolution in front of us to consider mixed use development at that address. So let me quickly ask each planning commissioner if you have any ex parte disclosures of contact with anyone who's provided information to the planning commissioners not on the record, so that information may be used as part of the decision-making process. Is there any such contact? I'm not seeing any, so we'll move on. Then we're ready for the staff report. John, are you ready to jump in on this, or do you need to be introduced, or how do we start?
I am good to go.
Okay.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to share my screen, see if this works. Let me pull up the presentation. Okay. Let's see if I can get this to work. That's not quite it. Oops. Let's try this again. All right, do you see the presentation?
Here we go.
Okay. All right, here we go. So tonight we'll be hearing about the Bullock Ranch project, which has a number of parts which I want to go through. I'm going to make my presentation as brief as possible. The staff report does cover quite a bit. And then the applicant team is here, Bullock Ranch LLC, led by Barry Ephraim, to provide a presentation. John Young is part of the group as well. We'll start with a recommendation. We recommend that you adopt the draft resolution, recommending that the City Council approve the development plan based on the findings and subject to conditions of approval, including allowing live-work units and so forth, approving a vesting tentative tract map, approving a summary abandonment of a previous offer of 30-foot offer to dedicate public street and utility purposes for public street and utility purposes, and also to adopt a mitigated negative declaration that covers the environmental impacts associated with the project. A little background on where we are. This is within the Orchid Area Specific Plan. This map is sort of on its side, where we have the railroad at the bottom of the Orchid area, which is all colorful. The project site is sort of in the northwestern part of that. And the railroad goes right along the western or lower edge of the map here. A little more detail. The project site is 10.93 acres, adjacent to Bullock Lane. The Orchid area itself is 231 acres, so it's a relatively small part of the area. It's zoned R3 within the specific plan for the most part. There's a commercial area a bit on the far eastern edge. The site currently supports 2 vacant homes, a barn, accessory structures, and 56 trees. The general plan designates it as medium high density residential and community commercial under the Orchid Area Specific Plan. It's zoned consistently as R3 and community commercial mixed use, currently generally vacant. And of course, being in the Orchid Area Specific Plan, there's development that's occurring in different parts of the area. But to the east, you have some of that new residential development, vacant land. You do have the Bullock Lane and the Union Pacific Railroad just to the west. North, you have a couple of single-family homes and a mobile home park. And to the south, a soon-to-be developed area. The project itself would include 192 residential units. That's 88 bungalows, mostly on the eastern side, 96 townhouse apartments, mostly on the western side of the site. The project also includes 7 live-work units along Ranch House Road, which is essentially the eastern edge of the site, and 1 unit above a small commercial space in that same area along with the other live-work units, which is to say a unit on top and potential commercial use at the bottom or some workspace at the bottom. There would be commercial space. There would be a 585 square foot commercial unit as part of all this. There'd be community center facilities, 1,766 square foot community center that includes different facilities, and then a community pool building and different amenities that are related, including a pool, landscaped areas, shade structure, fire pit, etc. There'd be various roadway and infrastructure improvements, Bullock Lane improvements, and a bike path extension along Bullock Lane. We do have the folks from Public Works here to answer any questions related to this, because I think it might be an issue that you may want to focus on. The project architecture encompasses a few different styles: California Mission, Mission Ranch, and Farmhouse. I only bring it up here briefly because we did go to architectural review and they went through it extensively, ultimately recommending approval to your body, and then you at this point would take action to potentially take it forward to the City Council. Again, the site plan here just shows the only thing I want you to take away from this is there's a mix of styles throughout the site that relate to the different types of product that would be on the site. So it is a diverse looking project within the context of its site, at least from a visual standpoint. I want to show you a couple of renderings. I know the applicant team probably has a lot more detail about this, just to show you a sense of the scale and the type of development that would be there. This graphic I want to show specifically because it's a correction from what was included in your staff report. This actually shows, you probably can't even tell the difference, but there are some differences here that ARC recommended some changes relative to the coverings over the patio to make it more consistent from a style perspective. And this graphic does reflect that it doesn't in the staff report. Again, here's the live work units. You can get a sense of the density and how they lay out side by side along Ranch House Road. Here's another corrected graphic, or a piece of a corrected graphic. This again shows just a piece of the development. Here showing the balconies that are now more enclosed, a little more private than what had originally been proposed, but ARC had recommended some changes to allow a little bit more privacy within those areas. Now let's talk about affordable housing. The requirements are that there be 7 inclusionary units. That's consistent with the housing element and municipal code. The proposed project does that. Has 7 inclusionary units, 2 low income, 5 moderate income units, These would be spread throughout the site and include both types of housing products, the bungalows and the townhouses. And this graphic just illustrates that. This plan shows the different colors are where there would be different affordable units, inclusionary units, the orange ones being the low income ones, the yellow ones being the moderate income ones. And you see they're all over the site and not in one clump here, which is intentional and that's consistent with city policy. It also includes both kinds of housing products. The applicants have proposed a sign program, including 9 wall signs, a monument sign, and an apartment community sign. Staff has reviewed that. Sign program is consistent with municipal code requirements. There would be public and private open space. The municipal code requires 100 square feet of common open space per unit for a common interest subdivision in the R3 zone, and that's what this would be. And the project provides 75,000 plus feet of accessible landscaped area. That includes courtyards and parkways, quite a bit of publicly accessible hardscaped areas, including paseo sidewalks, gathering areas, and that far exceeds what the code requires. There would also be private open space in the units, varying from a little bit in the smallest units, 37 square feet, to as much as 600 square feet in some of the larger units, but there would actually be private open space with each unit. All this is consistent with municipal code requirements. There is a requested setback for the live-work units. The applicant has requested the first floor of the live-work units be allowed to be within 50 feet of the street. That request is consistent with mixed-use provisions in the municipal code because it does enhance the pedestrian environment. It's also consistent with the Orchid Area Specific Plan that encourages live-work units in the multifamily portion of the community commercial zone, which is where they would be. And all this accommodates a design to make this more achievable within the greater site context. This was heard by the tree committee back in October of 2020, about a year ago. The tree committee recommended a few things: removing the bird of paradise from the tree planting list, planting coast live oak trees as street trees, and ensuring tree replacement is at least 1-to-1. The updated plan you have has been revised to respond to these items. ARC heard this also about a year ago. I think it was December of last year. They suggested a few things, and I've touched on a couple: partially solid guardrails on balconies, limiting them to the upper floors for privacy, considering the use of masonry on front porches. Those first two items you saw in the graphics that I showed you before. And then considering shelter elements outside doors leading to the garage. And I think that's in your agenda report. I don't think I have a slide here. But again, something to the plans you have do respond to those items. In terms of overall policy consistency, again, the Orchid Area Specific Plan is the guiding document here, and it is consistent with policies regarding mixed use, density, connectivity, affordability, the live-work unit requirements, and so forth. It provides 412 parking spaces where 399 are required, and then bicycle spaces as well. I'm going to throw a caveat in on those 412 parking spaces in a moment, but just hold that number for a second here. The zoning regulations are also in play, and the project is consistent with the mixed use lighting and signing provisions there that are not otherwise covered in the Orchid Area Specific Plan. Project is consistent with the common open space requirements of the subdivision regulations. And as I've noted before, it's consistent with the affordable housing requirements. There's one aspect of this project having to do with summary abandonment of a previous dedication, that offer of dedication, 30-foot offer or 30-foot public street and utility offer of dedication. Staff has determined, in working closely with the applicants, and I can tell you staff has worked very closely with the applicants over the last few months on this issue, has determined this offer is no longer needed to meet the requirements related to Bullock Lane improvements. Therefore, it qualifies for summary abandonment per state and local law, and that will be reflected on the final map. The CEQA documentation for this, there was a draft mitigated negative declaration that was circulated for 30 days at the end of 2020. One letter was received from APCD. A response to APCD is provided in your packet as attachment H. There were no revisions to the analysis or mitigation measures needed as a result. It's also important to note that this draft M&D tiered from the original Orchid Area Specific Plan Final EIR, certified back in 2009, the parent document for anything that goes on in the Orchid Area. And the draft MND incorporated the appropriate mitigation measures from that EIR wherever applicable. Now I want to get back to that 412 parking space issue. There are a couple of corrections from the agenda report, a couple of which were brought up through the eagle eye of some of your planning commissioners, or at least one of your planning commissioners, having to do with the motorcycle parking requirements. The project plan included a incorrect calculation of how that was done. I think it showed 16, but 20 were actually required, and that's accurate. One motorcycle space per the 20 spaces, or each 20 car spaces are required. So 399 were required. That means we need 20 motorcycle spaces. And we've worked with the applicant since that to propose a revision to allow 20 throughout the site. And within the agenda correspondence, we have a graphic showing how that would be done. They be provided throughout the site. But what that proposed revision does is remove 2 parking spaces. So instead of 412, there'd now be 410 parking spaces, which still exceeds the 399 that are required. And as I noted before, 2 of the figures within the agenda report were inaccurate, and they've been updated to reflect ARC direction. You've seen those in previous slides. Now, for the conditions of approval, the applicant has requested minor modifications to several project conditions, the intent of which is to clarify or make them more implementable. Staff has reviewed those with the applicant and is supportive of most of these changes, and that revised language is shown in response to the agenda correspondence that you have. And so the next steps, you are here to consider this project and for the consistency with city policies and programs, with the context of the RC and tree committee recommendations. And then if you recommend approval, city council will based on your recommendation, city council will consider project approval, and then we'll go from there. And at this point, I believe city council would be hearing this in January, and I think the date is January 11, if it stays on schedule. And with that, that concludes my presentation. We do have the applicant ready with the presentation, but I'm prepared to answer any questions you might have. And I will now unshare my screen.
Good. Thank you, John. So are there questions of staff? Steve?
Yes. You talk about apartments on the west side. They're called townhouse apartments, but this is a condominium subdivision. So would they be ownership in a condominium?
You know, I'll let the applicants speak to that because they'll have a lot of detail on that
Okay.
discussion right there.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I have
Anyone
a
else?
couple of questions.
Yeah, Mike.
Okay, thank you. First of all, as it was just mentioned that staff was in agreement with most of the proposed changes by the applicant that were shown in the staff report or in the agenda correspondence, the subsequent agenda correspondence. Can you tell us which one staff is not in agreement with, or is staff objecting to any of these?
Again, I'll let, if Luke Schwartz is on this, he could go into more detail. But for right now, I will say we're in general agreement with all the clarifications suggested that had to do with conditions. We suggested some language and went back and forth to get it into place where I believe the applicant is comfortable with where we're at this point. There was some discussion relative to one of the mitigation measures that was suggested to be removed, which again is sort of a technical issue related to the fact it was included in the original Orchid Area Specific Plan EIR that had to do with the fees having to do with drainage improvements. Staff has subsequently determined that that issue related to drainage is already covered within the conditions and the project design anyway. And although that mitigation measure doesn't apply, we can't really remove it because it was part of the original EIR. So what we're saying here is that it's being complied with through other means, and so it's in substantial conformance with the EIR for that reason.
Okay, well, if staff wishes commission to change some of the modifications, I'd be interested in hearing what staff has to say on that at the appropriate time. I do have a couple of other questions on noise. I noticed in the plans that some of the balconies in the townhouse apartment development that's closest to the railroad tracks, some of those balconies appear to have noise barriers. It looks like a plexiglass type screen. And I think that's in accordance with one of the mitigation measures for noise. I just wanted to confirm that all of the balconies that are within that specified distance from the railroad tracks, I think it was 160 something feet, whether all of those will have those barriers to mitigate noise from the railroad.
Again, that's my understanding, but I want to make sure that's confirmed with the applicant through their presentation.
Okay, and then finally, and maybe this is for the applicant too, but it has to do with the bike path, the offsite bike path. And I saw on the plans that there are these strips or shoulders on either side of the bike path that are shown. They seem to be between 1.5 and 3 feet in width. And I was wondering what the treatment of those areas is proposed to be, if those are supposed to be decomposed granite or landscaped or paved. I was interested because there were some comments in the correspondence about making the bike path wider. So I was wondering if there was an opportunity to do that in those shoulder areas.
And I'll let Luke answer this when I see he has his hand raised.
Okay, all right. I'll wait to hear from staff then.
Thanks, commissioners. A couple items you mentioned about. The first was, were there any suggested modifications to the conditions as presently presented that the applicant requested that we were not in agreement on? I think the only one that that John had mentioned was one regarding the timing of when the bike path would need to get constructed. And I think the applicant's request was to tie a time frame to when they pull grading permits, where our preference was to tie it to building permits, and that was the only discrepancy. And I think we had gone back and forth, and they were comfortable with the language as currently modified in the agenda correspondence that John mentioned. There was, the way it was originally drafted basically there was a hypothetical in that if we obtained the right of way needed with the railroad, but they had stalled out for whatever reason, there would still be a requirement to construct the path, even if they hadn't proceeded with building permits or moving forward with their project, where the current language gives some flexibility that they're not going to have to build the path ahead of time, even if their project might stall out for several years. So at this point in time, I think we're all in alignment with that language. With regard to the design, I'll note there is a preliminary design concept provided in the appendix as an attachment to the staff report. Basically kind of lays out the general alignment we've been working through with the applicant team. In terms of shoulders, there needs to be at least a minimum 2-foot shoulder on either side, and that would be provided. It needs to be ride worthy. So it could be decomposed granite, it could be compressed soil with mulch, but it has to be something that's not going to be a drop off and that is recoverable if you're off tracking. The intent is where we have is to provide some landscaping, whether that's narrow trees or or growies, but there needs to be at least a minimum shoulder. And I know this will come up too, is our intent is to try to keep a 12-foot minimum path as much as possible. And if we have that flexibility in negotiations with the railroad, that's what we'd like to build. There might be some constraints where we have to narrow to 10 feet. I think there is some language about potential an 8-foot path. That's the absolute minimum allowed by the state. Our standard is 12 feet. That's our preference. We know that we can accommodate at least a continuous 10 to 12-foot path throughout. So I just want to make that clear. Our intent's not to be supporting an 8-foot path. That's basically acknowledged if there's some constraint with the railroad that's unavoidable at a pinch point or something, but that's not our intent with this design.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Great, thank you, Mike. Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Jorgensen. I think I have one question. I'll just start with another railroad question. There was some correspondence noting concern about the status of the negotiations with the Union Pacific. So I just wanted to see if staff could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. It's always a challenge. We've tried to guide the design as much as possible to avoid conflicts with the railroad. The vast majority of the path alignment, we can do that. We'll need a small strip for a construction easement, a basic area that's needed for the contractor to put in security fencing, lighting. Otherwise, the real pinch point is you get to a narrow culvert just south of Orcutt along Bullock, where we do need to jog to the west into the railroad right away and cross with a dedicated ped bike bridge. And that's where we really need an encouragement agreement. It can take time, and it takes and it's a process. It's a large bureaucracy at the railroad. Just for context, the current project in construction up along California, the Taft to Pepper extension. Took years, but part of that was developing alignments and concept designs. And from the point where we had confirmation from the railroad that they had their designs to final agreements was about 24 months. And that was a much more complex project, a lot more significant encroachment to the railroad right away, actual bridges on their property, bridges crossing over the railroad. This is much simpler. So we've identified basically a timeline that we already started negotiations with them, or at least an application. So we'll have an on-site meeting in the next couple of months. So we feel that we have a good understanding of the process, but it is something that we're already taking action on and will be a critical path item with the bike path.
Okay, great. Thank you. So just to confirm my understanding, both in terms of the width of the railroad path or the bike path and the term of the negotiations is really a conservative estimate. And the intention is to move much quicker and have the path hit the full 12 feet.
Yes, I think both the city and I won't speak for the developer, but from our conversations, their intent is if they could build this, right off the bat and get this built as part of their project public improvements, they do that. It's really, there's a party that's outside of our control. It's outside of their control. So trying to find a balance that gives urgency for the city and the applicant to continue to try to get there, but also isn't constraining the development project as something that's completely out of the control for years and years and years.
Yeah, that makes sense. I imagine the developer does want to build it as soon as possible. And then I just had one more question on the affordable housing in regards to the different unit types. Can you confirm my understanding? So we have the townhomes and then also the apartment buildings. Would it be an equity share for the townhomes for home ownership and then like long-term deed restricted for the rental units? Or is that to be determined?
I don't have a good answer for that, although it's possible Tyler might, or possibly the applicant team might have that. So,
yeah, I can jump in. Typically, the decision on whether they're going to enter into an agreement with equity share or long term doesn't happen at this kind of stage of the project. There's more discussions and clarifications that happen as the project gets further refined and makes it through kind of into the building permit stage. But it looks like Rachel's popped on, so she might have some additional information to share.
Thank you, Tyler. I just wanted to add that for clarification, those townhomes are rentals, and at this point in time, the map reflects that. So those will be under our affordable housing agreement for those units. And then as Tyler mentioned, the for sale units would be under that equity share program.
Okay, great. Appreciate the clarification. And that's it for my questions. Thank you.
Other questions?
I just had a follow-up, Commissioner Chair
Sure.
Jorgensen, just a follow-up on the townhome apartments. I just heard that they would be rentals, but I thought I saw on the map, on the vesting tentative tract map, that they're identified as airspace condominiums. So I just wanted to and I think this is following up on Commissioner Khan's question. Just wanted to confirm that those are airspace condominiums. Whether they're rented later is a different story, but are they supposed to be airspace condominiums?
it's an airspace condominium subdivision, so yes. But again, if I'm speaking out of turn here, Rachel, please correct me.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think also the applicant will be able to speak to their sort of their vision of how the project moves forward.
Good. Other questions? I have one about parking. Is that for you, John, or maybe for Luke?
Let's see what the question is.
Well, let me just jump in. You described 412 spaces being provided, 397 required. You were going to say that means 15 extra in a sense. By any chance, does that include the parking spaces that would be on Bullock that are shown in the cross section? Kind of presume not, but I just wanted to check.
I will not looking at any graphics, I'm not sure how to answer that, but I think it's something that when the applicant does their presentation, we can clarify that at that point. And I also note that the requirement's 399, not 397. And then as proposed, they will be doing 410, not 412, partly to accommodate the motorcycle requirement. So they can use some of that space for motorcycle parking.
Okay. Thank you. Well, we'll talk to the applicant then.
Sure.
Good. So we're ready for the applicant's presentation? Yes, let's go ahead with that. Welcome.
Hi, this is,
Can you hear me okay?
this is
Hear you.
Deputy Clerk Christian. I just wanted to clarify with Mr. Young, if you need any of your team to come on board, they can raise their hand, or if you say their names, then I'll go ahead and promote them when after you say
Yeah,
that.
I'll tell you right now, it'll be Brian Sevi and Rick Polhamus. That'll be kind of at the tail end of our presentation.
Great, thanks so much.
I thought maybe I could address some of the questions quickly at the beginning. Is that okay before I present?
Sure. It's all part of your presentation.
On the parking, we don't count any parking that would be on a public street. So there's no parking other than what's on our site. And yes, we want to build the bike path as quickly as we can because we think it's a benefit to everybody. And we think it'll be an asset to our project and the community. So we do want to get it going. The noise barriers will be included on all of the areas that are within the 160 foot. I think it was approximately 160 feet from the railroad that was part of our sound study. So that will also be part of our plans. And the ownership, we do on the apartments, we do have a condo map on it, but we fully intend to just be renting them. So it's something that I've done on lots of units. We typically do a condo map in case that ever in the future you ever wanted to convert them, but never done that though. But so, and is there any other questions real quick before we start? Okay, let me, I'm going to do a PowerPoint here. There we go. So we'd like to thank you guys for hearing our project tonight.
I haven't seen it yet.
Pardon me?
Yeah, Mr. Young, I think, your video isn't showing and you're not sharing your screen. So maybe we can take a second
okay, sorry.
figure out the technology on your end and then we'll get.
I thought it was sharing. Huh. Uh-oh. Let's see here. Maybe we can try this. Let's see what happens when I do this.
There we go.
But are you seeing, you're probably seeing my working copy here, not the other one, right? That's okay.
So, you can change the screen. There's a setting there, right up above. Yeah, right there. You can, I believe that's the place where you can swap. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
And then your video is not on either, and I don't know whether that's intentional or not. But
I tried to turn it on, but so it's
okay.
It's just my. I wanted to say when I came on, I only have young on there, and I'm not even young. So.
Speak for yourself.
So we'd like to thank you guys for letting us present our project tonight. Barry Ephraim is with us, Brian Sevi from KTGY, Rick Polhamus from Sitescapes, and Matt Walsh with Walsh Engineering are also with us here tonight. We had some overarching goals that we wanted to basically achieve in our project, and those were to encourage walking, biking, social interaction, land efficient and land efficiency by affordable design. We wanted to reduce the visibility of cars and garages. We wanted to incorporate housing typologies that were diverse by type, size, and uses. And we wanted to have distinct but complementary architectural styles and to connect to the city bike path system. We see that as a big asset. Our project is located on two parcels. The purchase of the second parcel a year after the first provided us with much more width to make a much more inviting neighborhood because of it was able to give us more room to really do the right thing. The site is between Bullock Lane and Ranch House Road and Sponza to the east. This allowed us to create a main street because we had enough width to do this. And we then took the main street and had it terminate at our Focal Point Recreation Community Center. And it also kind of gave us the ability to kind of limit the automobile traffic that went through. We also included portals that then extend into paseos to the surrounding homes to activate the fronts of the homes and the patios. We're also able to integrate. This was a question that came up, I think, during when some of the commissioners were first looking at the project. We also can incorporate some connectivity to our townhomes and apartments that are being built to the south of us. We wanted to promote bike travel by connecting the bike path that runs along Ranch House Road through our project and extend it along. Then it goes on to Bullock and all the way up to Orchid and connects all the way to downtown. And here you can see how our overarching goals are reflected in the site plan as we overlay it. This slide shows the circulation plan from the Orchid specific plan with the green area down on the left. There is the new bike path that will be put in, and it will connect the bike system all the way into the southern part of the city. Now let's talk a little bit about our amenities. We have a central recreation facility. This complex includes 2 California mission style structures, bookcasing our pool and spa. The larger structure you see on the right is our recreation building with resident club room, fitness. And then on the left side, the smaller building is where we have pool restrooms, pool equipment, a bike maintenance shop that's right off the bike path, and a resident mail pickup. And we try to do the mail pickup as kind of a gathering area to kind of create a better experience. A little farther to the east, we have another gathering area closer to Ranch House. And this provides a second outdoor kitchen and a dining area, along with a fire pit and also a community mail area that will also have some dedicated parking. We mentioned earlier our focus on a walkable community. This starts with a strong multi-use pathway connecting through the entire project. Here you can see where it starts on Ranch House Road, and then it runs along the north side of Main Street with the enhanced resident portals into the north-south paseos, and continues out to Bullock Way as it crosses via a raised tabletop crossing onto the 12-foot multi-use bike path. We also have provided a tremendous amount of pervious pavers on the project. As you can see here, the benefits of this, as you can see here, I didn't click it for you. As you can see here, the benefits of that are that it provides much needed storm water mitigation while not taking up viable land, and it takes about 45,000 square feet of what would be asphalt and replaces it with a very attractive finish. And I'm not sure if Brian's on, but now I was going to transition over to Brian Sevi so he could present the architecture side of things.
No, thanks, John. I'm here. Welcome, members of the Planning Commission. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to present this. I'll walk through just a few of the elements of the architecture, try not to repeat too many things that were already discussed in the staff presentation, which was very thorough and detailed, I think. But this exhibit highlights a little bit the massing of our project and how we've designed these different typologies to fit in with the adjacent buildings, including the projects that have already been approved to the south of our site. On the east edge of our site, we have 3-story farmhouse style live-work building, which is just next to the already approved live-work building just to the south. Then in the center of our site, this area is 2-story massing. These are detached bungalow 2-story townhomes, and these are adjacent to and similar in massing to the 2-story townhomes that were approved just to the south of this project site. And then on the west edge of our site, we have 3-story These are 3-story townhome style apartments in a Mission Ranch architectural style. And this is consistent with the height and scale and architectural style of the housing project that was approved just to the south of our site. So a combination of 1, 2, and 3-story massing. And here's some renderings. Some of these were shown earlier of the 2-story bungalow homes that are proposed. The next image shows some street scenes of kind of what that architecture looks like from within our community. It's a blend of architectural forms. It's all Mission Ranch and California Mission architectural theme with primarily 2-story massing and a variety of architectural elements along our internal street and along that bike path. This shows just a couple of those architectural details that make up the California Mission style. It's primarily identified with arches and brick details, precast column at the colonnades, wrought iron details, similar elements. The next, here we go. This shows some examples of the Mission Ranch style, which is a little more rustic, more wood accents, wood siding, wood balcony elements that enhance that architectural style. Here's some renderings of the 3-story townhome apartments. These are California Mission style. So again, strong use of arched arcades with brick accents and a variety of trellis and iron and tile accents on this architectural style. These are just some of the different elevations. This, I think, was discussed already in the staff report of some of the changes that were made to enhance the privacy of the balconies. And then this slide shows some of the changes that were made at the recommendations of the design review to make the massing a little less heavy at the ground floor and focus the brick on the arches to emphasize those arched entries. And then there was also some recommendations at the design review about adding some covered awnings at some of the entries into the garages. Some of these homes have detached garages that enter through private patio yards. And the suggestion was made to possibly consider some cover for those garage doors. So these are some of the designs that we have created that would be proposed for the covering of those garage doors. We think this is something that would possibly be offered as an option for the home buyer if they did want to have the option of having that cover over the entry. This is the architectural design that we would propose for that. And here's an assortment of some of the detailing that makes up the townhome architectural style for the Mission Ranch architecture. And then on the west edge, as was mentioned, we have a 3-story live-work townhome. This is designed to blend with and be next to the approved live-work building just to the south of our community. So this is more of a farmhouse architectural style. And then the next image shows the kind of 4-sided architecture that's proposed for that building. And then here's some of the details: wood corbels and gable ends, trellis elements. And we have a wraparound porch at the end where we have an enhanced live-work unit with expanded commercial space. And then here's some areas where we've identified potential signage for these live-work units. Each of these live-work homes has a ground floor commercial or retail space, and these are the signage opportunities that we've identified for that live-work building. I'll let Rick walk through some of the landscape features of the site.
Well, great.
Hi,
thank you.
before you begin, this is Deputy Clerk Christian. I just wanted to jump in to remind you, you are about a minute away from the 10-minute mark. So if you could
Well, we saved the best for last, and I'll do it fast.
Yeah. let's
Okay,
go.
so as for any authentic project that's trying to do the best, you already saw the site plan, how it works with the California mission. You saw the architecture, how it goes with California mission. The last layer of that is, of course, the landscaping. We used palm sparingly to help with the skyline and give authenticity. But these all live off these courtyards, and the courtyards had the entries that were just discussed with the arched vine-covered entryways and these courtyard spaces that once you walk through, it opens up into this green, multi-layered landscape, lush, that complements the architecture. The next slide shows the materials that we used for that authenticity that plays off the architecture, the quality of materials, the colors, and in all Spanish, true Spanish, they have moments of surprise of wow, bang, a bunch of color on a tile in a small space, a planned surprise. We have those built in as tile benches and pots as a third layer to the whole experience of the Spanish architecture. This is the squint test of the color palettes and materials that we're using. The center plant, the bird of paradise, has been asked to be removed from the tree committee, but the rest is all here. This is the essence of what the experience would be, the third layer that complements the architecture and accents and shows off the master site plan opportunities. How'd I do? 1 minute?
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
Thank you, guys. We're here to answer questions.
Good. So commissioners, are there questions of the applicant? Singular or plural? Steve.
Thank you. On the landscaping, I would assume that you're going to create a homeowner association in the condominium units, and the landscaping outside the houses will be maintained by a contractor hired by the homeowner association.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mike Woken, looks like you're ready.
Yes. Thank you, Chair Jorgensen. I have a couple of questions for the applicant's team. First of all, I noticed that there are over 100 3- and 4-bedroom units in this project, which indicates that there would be some families, probably some families with young children. So I did not see a tot lot in the project, and I was wondering if there is one, and if you considered that to serve the families that might be moving in.
Actually, I think we don't have one, but it's probably a good point that maybe we should investigate putting one in. I do think we'd have the opportunity to do one at the eastern end, where I showed you like the outdoor kitchen that occurs at that end. There might be an opportunity to put it there. But at the current point in time, we don't have a tot lot.
We do have synthetic turf panels and open play areas, free play a frisbee or something like that, but we don't have the typical climbing apparatus. We do have the open space to do that, though.
Okay. Well, I'll see what the commissioners think of that at the later time when we get to our deliberations. One more question has to do with the balconies on the 1-bedroom units. And I noticed that the balconies appear to be about 4 feet deep, which I think the balconies could be more functional as private open space if they were a little deeper. And I was wondering if there's any reason that they couldn't be deeper than 4 feet. Seems like I think they're 37 square or 38 square feet for the 1-bedroom units. And could they be any larger?
We can look into that. Maybe Brian can talk to that. Part of it, I believe, is being conscious of moving trucks that would run into these balconies, since they're facing an alley. They're on an alley load, so we would have to be, because we would love to make them deeper. So Do you
This
have
is
any
this-
thoughts on that, Brian?
I think you have the potential to try and grow the balcony probably means just trying to take a little bit of space from within the conditioned space of that
Yeah.
home. And I think trying to strike a balance to have some homes in this community that are smaller is one of the goals, to have a variety of sizes within this community, including some 3 bedrooms and some 4 bedrooms, but also some smaller 1-bedroom homes. So we could look at maybe trying to get a little bit more of that living space put into the outdoor balcony space on those units.
Okay, thank you. I'll see what, we'll see what commissioners think.
And maybe if we could go back to the tot lot one of the things that we do rely on to a certain extent is the regional park that's only like, I don't know if it's like 100 yards away. It's not very far from the east end of our project.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Let me jump in quickly, thinking about bicycle parking just for a second. So I take it the bulk of the bicycle parking will be located 2 each, sort of Noah's Ark style in each unit somewhere? Is that?
Yes, every unit has a garage and they'll be able to park their bikes in the garages.
Mm-hmm. So that'll at least give them access to electricity, although the question comes, can you lift an e-bike onto a hook or something like that?
Yeah, we also, we're going to put an outlet in the garages for vehicle charging, because we have to future-proof this project. And right now, there might only be 5% or some lower number of people that will have electric vehicles. But in very near future, that's going to change. And people do not want to charge their cars in the parking lot. You know, they don't want to charge them out there. They want to charge them in their garage. So that'll be available too. I don't know if that'll tie in at all with charging of the bicycles, but I think that's probably just for the 110 outlet. We'd be putting in a 220 for the charging of the cars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you'll get some bicycle traffic in the, I guess I'll call them guest bicycle spots.
Yeah, we have
clusters.
We have a network of those throughout the project of bicycle parking. Yeah.
There'll be people bringing their electric bikes there and might look for a little destination charging to get back to where they came from, but maybe that's at a later date. Who knows?
Something to think about.
Yeah. Any further questions of commissioners of the applicants? Ema, are you? Yes, please.
I was just wondering about the requirements, not the requirements, but the potential for solar. What consideration was given for that?
On solar under Title 24, we will have solar on every unit. I can't speak to I don't know the code exactly on how much there'll be, but we do have to provide solar on every one of the 192 units.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else, I'll ask one last question. I had asked my first question, go to waiting for others to jump in. So looking at the bungalow clusters, I notice when I'm looking at the plan views that the garages are actually a fair distance. The garage and the exit from the garage is a fair distance, say, for the units that are called P3, and for that matter, P5, but particularly P3. That looks like a fairly long walk around to the front of the house and the only door that opens, at least just looking from the very small plan view of where there's an entry. And it didn't look as if the sides of the yards kind of look like they're facing, maybe our landscape, that they don't look like pathways. So I'm just curious how people get from the P3 and P5 garages.
Can you see my screen right now, or can I share it?
I can see Central Park.
Yeah. We just changed sites a little bit.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay.
It's working now, John.
Yeah, so this is, let me see if I can just show this. Did it switch again on me?
No, you're good.
No, that's
Okay.
good. I see.
So,
So
yeah,
the sliding doors will have an entry.
the sliding doors they have to have locks on them. So it's a good point. We will be putting locks on these doors because that's how people are going to come home at night.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking of them coming home with groceries. And
Yeah.
sure it's
I
not
mean,
too complicated. At least the
Yeah,
kitchen.
but
Got it.
yeah, so they will need to walk through their backyard though. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. That was a helpful presentation. So we'll move to public comment. Kevin, are there members of the public who would like to speak on this item?
Chair, let's give the public a little bit of time. I'll just verbally go through the instructions. If you'd like to speak on this item, go ahead and raise your hand. When I call on you, I will promote you to a panelist where then you can monitor your own video and audio, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. We'll give people another 10 seconds or so. At this point so far, though, we have nobody asking to speak on this item. There you go. I've got one, Helene. I will promote you to a panelist now. And you'll have 3 minutes once you get your audio connected to speak. If you could introduce yourself, first and last name.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Hi, my name is Helene Finger. Sorry for the mask, but I'm actually on campus at Cal Poly and inside a building. I stepped outside of a meeting. I just wanted to say how excited I am for this project. In fact, taking my sister over to look at the site because units and move in. I just sent a letter, which I'm assuming you had an opportunity to look at. I want to really highlight the once ever opportunity you have for connecting the multi-use trail. I know there was discussion about how it's expected that negotiations with the railroad should be not a problem, but I ask that you consider updating the conditions of approval so that if the right-of-way negotiations are unproductive, then you can look at revising the alignment for both the roadway and the path. There are several ways that you could accomplish that, including looking at continuing the roadway to continue straight without having a jog in the roadway. Because right now what's happening is the roadway is jogging into the location where a straight pathway would have continued. There's also ways that you could look at reducing the motor vehicle traffic so that you have the shared space, part of it for the bicycle and part of it for the motor vehicle. So just wanted to make sure that you don't build the road and the project without the bike trail, and then you're stuck not ever being able to put the bike trail in. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Glad to hear our meetings at least as exciting as the one you were in.
Not nearly. It's the Society of Women Engineers, and they've got a lot of energy.
We'll try to match that. Okay, thank you. Are there any other speakers, Kevin?
I'm checking the attendee audience again, and I don't see any other hands. We'll give them another 5 seconds. Okay, seeing no other hands raised, I would say no more comments on this item from the public.
Well, let's bring it back to the commission for deliberation then. Who'd like to begin? Ema, please.
I did read the letters from the people who are so excited about the bikeway, and I wondered if the presenters have any thoughts about a backup plan should the negotiations with the railroad right-of-way be not as successful as they hope. I don't know if we can go back to them to answer that question, but when I was reading the material, I was wondering if there was a backup plan just in case.
Let's let
didn't go
Luke
as-
Schwartz jump in on it, since there have been discussions about all of this. And we'll
Sure.
see if we need to go back to the applicants or not.
Sure, I'm happy to weigh in on that. I think if we ultimately run into a roadblock with the railroad and find that there's not a path forward with the stretch where we need the right of way, there are some options to try and get the trail as far to the north as possible without having to require their approval. It probably mean narrowing up some of those additional sections, whether it's less of a shoulder, dropping some of the landscape parkway area, narrowing the path itself. The challenge is once you get to that narrow culvert, your other option is basically reconstructing that complete culvert, including widening significantly to the east where there's a residential property. We looked at that too and kind of weighed the cost benefit and what would be a more feasible approach. The challenge with that is we had concerns that we wouldn't, for one, we don't own that right of way. So that's another right of way acquisition that would need to be explored. But also we had concerns that it couldn't be done in a way that wouldn't completely affect that entire property and the usability of the single family home. So the desired approach is to start with negotiations with the railroad. And the way that the conditions are set is that if that's not fruitful, we get to a point where we say, hey, applicant, build as much as you can without the railroad, pay the rest of your fees. The city takes us on and looks at an alternate approach. If that's reconstructing the culvert, if that's looking at other property deals, we can take that on, at least get as close as possible. Maybe at that point you can ramp down back to the street and have a short stretch of a shared road with adequate, design to convey that as a shared space. So the intent is to try to get as far as we can. But as far as a backup plan, it's going to be basically that reconstructing that culvert, which is a whole another challenge that would require more detail. And that's probably something that we'd honestly prefer to take on at the city and take the lead because they think we could get to that solution quicker.
I see. Thank you.
Could I follow up on that? It sounds as if there's adequate parking for this project relative to our requirements. In fact, there's a little extra. How important is the street parking? It sounds like the city has required that as part of the, at least the section we saw.
Sure. So the cross section you're seeing is basically in line with what was adopted in the Orchid Area Specific Plan, which identifies a typical section for Bullock that includes parking on one side, on the east side of the street, dropping the parking. And in fact, we've already restricted most of the parking on that west side because of some issues with vandalism and illegal dumping and encroachment onto the railroad. So we're basically falling in line with that. If the train of thought is saying, well, if we decided that there's adequate on-site parking, could we look at narrowing the section and trying to shift the trail away from the railroad? It helps a bit with the need to potentially work with them on the construction easement south, where it's really just we need permission to be able to get on site temporarily to build the fencing. The bottleneck where we need a right-of-way agreement is really this pinch point where we're just south of that culvert where it's already so narrow, there's no parking. So we're not proposing parking on that stretch. There's not really flexibility on that stretch to try to take away parking width to try to keep the trail off the railroad property. There wasn't really an option in terms of those trade-offs there. We also have looked for the sections where we there is a short stretch where we're not able to provide parking just north of their frontage between there and the Willow Creek Mobile Home Park, where we're narrowing it and also just narrowing the lanes as much as we can within our standards to try to provide as much width as we can to get a full standard with the path as part of this. But with the parking, we're just retaining what was approved as part of the Orchid Area Specific Plan to retain a parking lane on one side of the street.
Mm-hmm. Well, could you imagine there's a condition, I'm going to say it's 39. I know I had it here a minute ago and I can find it again, but it talked about reducing the width of the bike path and maybe reducing the lane width for the cars. could you also imagine another possibility would just simply be eliminating the parking in front, understanding that that's probably not the major issue to deal with?
Yes, I think we could try to accomplish those additional 2 feet to retain a 2-foot path without sacrificing the parking, going to a narrower parking lane width, narrower lane width. My only concern with that would be inconsistency with the Orchid area specific plan and having to acknowledge a formal exception or amendment to the plan to deviate from the street cross section that was approved.
I see. What do you expect the traffic volumes to be on Bullock once the project's completed? Not this project, but Orchid Ranch.
That's a great question. And I have the traffic study we prepared for the project and can probably get a decent idea. I think when we've looked in the past, they're in line with what we planned for a collector street like this, which was in the range of 1,500 to 3,000 vehicles per day. I think when we had looked at the projections, it was in line with a similar street would be something like Pismo Street near the downtown. That's a one-way street, but similar level of volumes.
So pretty heavy. I mean, 3,000 is not a tremendous amount.
That was the upper end. I think the actual volumes are less than that, but also it was, the volumes were laid out in designing this kind of backbone street network as part of the Orchid area specific plan in the EIR. So Bullock is intended to serve as a collector street. So it's not going to be a residential street that carries a handful of trips a day. It'll carry some through traffic, but most of the through traffic is going to continue to use Orchid Road or Broad Street west of the railroad, where this will mainly be serving the uses within the Orchid area. But the volumes we've looked at would be in that 1,500 to 2,000 vehicles per day threshold.
I see. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Other questions of staff, or are we ready to deliberate? Let's deliberate. Keep this an exciting meeting. Nima,
So,
I see you.
I had a couple of comments. I appreciated Mr. Young's articulation of the design intent on the site plan, because when we look at these things online, which we are doing without drawings and so on, it's not always easy to understand the layout. So I think there's sort of increasing density towards the railroad, and I appreciate it. I was concerned about the density and massing of the site, but I think that the description that Mr. Young gave and the architectural relationship with what's going on to the south of the property, how it's mimicking a kind of development that's in place, I found was reassuring, because otherwise there's a danger of sort of piecemeal development in sections in this part of the city. So I thought that was valuable. I agree with Commissioner Walkin's idea that a tot lot would be a good thing. If you look at page 23 of our package and you see the public open space, it's really ribbons of connectivity, and there's green space around the community area, and then there's this subspace to the east near the entry to the project. But otherwise, really, this is a lot of housing with mostly connectivity pathways. So if you're a family with small kids, I think it might be nice to carve out something that was a destination spot that's secure and protected for smaller children, and which could become a community space. The small lot on the east, perhaps, could become rather no man's land. It's nice, decorative, but a tot lot might really help focus some places where this group of residents finds that they get together and interact, apart from the the pool and surrounding areas, which are very active recreation. So those are my 2 points. I support the tot lot idea.
Who else would like to jump in? Michael.
Thank you, Chair Jorgensen. I agree with the idea of recommendation of a tot lot. I think maybe as more of a loose condition. I would like the developer to have the opportunity to evaluate feasibility. Maybe, but I guess they have that between now and the council meeting. And then I'm generally supportive of all of the consistency findings. I think the one thing I just wanted to note, and this is not really related to the specific development, but I just wanted to mention really quickly a bit of disappointment with the Table 2A adjustments, reducing the affordable housing requirement from 27 units down to only 7. I think this is a good project. I think it's a much needed housing type, but I think looking at this maybe through the context of our arena goals, we're trading off some above moderate income units for low and moderate. But otherwise, I find I'm supportive of the project, and I find it to be, I agree with staff's findings of consistency.
And Michael, could I ask you, just to clarify, so there's each of these various projects within the ORCID plan have their own affordable housing requirement. Are you thinking of this in the context of the variety of things that are being proposed and expected to develop for affordable housing overall, or just kind of thinking of this project as a standalone?
Yeah, I'm even thinking just as a general policy that the Table 2A adjustment in whittling down the initial requirement of 27 units to 7, I found to be a bit disappointing. And so I know that's not what we're discussing here today, but I just wanted to note that as we have ongoing discussions, especially with inclusionary housing.
It looks like it's related to the density and the workforce housing. Looks like Michael Codron would also like to jump in on that.
And if I might just sort of say, if you look at Reno, moderate is really a place where we fall short in San Luis Obispo.
Right. No, I agree entirely. Yeah. It was the above moderate is sort of the ones I identified as the trade-off that we're making here. And I see, Michael, if you have anything to chime in there. But
just a real quick note that we hear you. It's been a frustration for us for some time, and we do have a program to update the inclusionary housing requirement, and I think that's going to go through a very public process, but I think core to our recommendation is to eliminate that affordable by design, the factoring in, because it hasn't proven, it's produced a very affordable housing stock. Like when you look across the board at the kinds of units we are producing in the city, smaller lots, higher density, smaller floor plans. I think that's really positive. When you think about 30 years, 50 years, 100 years of housing, where, we can't control the market today, but I think we're doing a good job of producing attainable housing that isn't overly large and overly expensive. But the Table 2A is something that we're highly focused on as part of the inclusionary housing ordinance update. And that process will be coming to the Planning Commission in 2022.
Thank you, Michael. And I apologize. I wasn't trying to make this
I know it's
an entire discussion about 2A, and I appreciate that clarification. It was just, I thought it was pretty stark here.
I know it's a little off topic, but I always look for those opportunities to
Thank you.
The community and the commission. So
it's relevant. It's part of the findings we're making here. So it's relevant.
Thank you, Michael.
Steve Kahn.
Thank you very much. First of all, I support the tot lot idea. I think that's a good idea to get a place where families can pull aside and let the kids run around and climb on a little jungle gym. So I support that idea. Second of all, I've been taking a look at the improvement plans for Bullock Lane and the pathway, the bike path. It seems like the right-of-way width is 2 15-foot lanes in a lot of areas, which a normal lane is 12 feet. So I see opportunities along Bullock to pull the road away from the bike path to provide more room, because I would like to see a consistent 12-foot bike path. And I have negotiated with the Union Pacific Railroad, and they're extremely difficult to negotiate with. They've done it successfully, the city has, which I'm glad to see with the other parts of the project, but it seems like there's opportunities in there to do that without the railroad's approval if we had to, by narrowing up Bullock Lane. And maybe if we could talk about that a little more, if Luke has some more comments on that, or if I'm just reading the plans wrong.
Sure. I think there is some potential to go into absolute minimum lane widths, minimum parking widths, to make sure we can endeavor to get that 12-foot paved path width. With regards to the railroad, that approach, there's just not enough width when we get to that pinch point to the northern side.
Oh, I see. So you got to have it.
Yep.
But you mentioned you thought that it looked likely that we could get it. I'm not holding you to it, but it seems like things are moving in a positive direction.
I would just say we have a better understanding of their process, have relationships with their staff more than we've had in the past. Yeah. And we got through a really challenging, successful negotiation most recently. Again, it's no guarantee, but I feel more I wouldn't say it's a home run, but I feel more confident than I have had it at any time I've been at the city.
All right. Well, then, without trying to hold this development up or trying to hold them in process, I would just encourage staff and the developer to work diligently to provide a 12-foot path along Bullock Lane. But I wouldn't want to suggest a condition that could stop the project because they couldn't get 12 feet in one spot. So those are my comments.
That's why I was looking at the parking. That didn't seem to be critical either. It's another way of getting at that. So maybe could I follow up just real quickly? If I'm summarizing what condition, a long condition, I got to get back to the front of it to see the number. It's number 80, Railroad Safety Trail Extension. That if the negotiations aren't complete with the railroad within 2 years, let's say after whenever the clock starts ticking, then it becomes a city project, I take it, in a sense, and not the developer's obligation. So we're not abandoning this, we just stalled.
Yeah, that's the intent. And under that scenario, we build as much as we can as part of the project. The remainder and the mechanism for the applicant being, there'd be a reimbursement agreement we'd be working on where basically they're not paying for costs for this. It's outside of their fair share. So under that circumstance, the funds that they would have normally been receiving a credit against their traffic impact fees, they would just pay in. That'd give us the revenue in the city coffers to basically take this on a capital project and keep it moving. In the active transportation plan that we adopted earlier this year, there's a handful of 8 or 9 crosstown corridors that we said these are the highest priorities. We're taking action on these first. The Railroad Safety Trail gap closure is one of those. So getting this closure, this connectivity in, at least get a complete path from Tank Farm north to the Amtrak station, and then from Cal Poly into Mill and Pepper Street, which is the current project in construction. We'll probably have some sort of on-street protected or low-stress route to get through downtown to bridge that gap now. But yeah, the intent would be if there's a roadblock with the railroad, that we would take this on as a high priority city project.
I see. It's good to hear. Ema, did you have something you wanted to add? Okay. Who else? Well, let's have a motion. Let's get something moving here.
I had a few comments, Chair Jorgensen.
Okay, please. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks. I think this project is clearly consistent with the Orca area specific plan. I want to commend the walkability of the project design and the connections within the project, and also to the adjacent Pratt project and the connections to the future regional bike path and the existing one that's for that matter. I'm real pleased to see the extension of Bullock Lane and the completion of Bullock Lane to, well, the eventual connection to Orcut, which I think is a needed emergency access route. I'm also real pleased, of course, to see the regional bike path connection ultimately. And I also, I heard some support on the commission for the idea of a tot lot. So I would like to suggest a condition that the applicant work with staff to provide a tot lot in an appropriate area. I heard the suggestion of using the eastern area mini park as a possible site for a tot lot. My only concern with that location might be the fact that it's pretty close to the main street. And I don't know if that's the right place or not for a tot lot, but I think if staff and the applicant can work on a feasible location, I think that would be great. So that would be a suggestion for a condition: work with staff to provide a tot lot in an appropriate location. And then I did hear when I was asking the applicant about the balconies on the one bedrooms, I heard maybe some willingness to look at possibility of a deeper balconies. So I don't know if I would suggest a condition, maybe just a direction that the applicant explore providing deeper balconies on the one bedroom apartments or townhouse apartments where feasible. I don't know if that's what the commission thinks about the balcony idea. We did, as a commission, just recently recommend a minimum of 65 square feet for balconies for private open space on ministerial projects. The balconies on this project are about 38 square feet for the one bedroom apartments. So much less than what we just recommended for a ministerial project. So I'd be interested to hear what the commission what the commission thinks on that. But I wouldn't be suggesting a condition, just a direction to explore the possibility or the feasibility of deepening those 4-foot deep balconies. Yeah. So those are my suggestions on the tot lot and the balcony. Otherwise, I'm real pleased with the design of the project and how it meets the specific plan requirements, goals, and policies, and so forth. And I'm prepared to make a motion at this time, unless there's other comments. So at this time, I'll make a motion to adopt the draft resolution that recommends to the City Council approving the development plan based on the findings and conditions. With that includes the exception for the live-work units within 50 feet of the street. Recommendation to approve the vesting tentative tract map, the summary abandonment of the 30-foot offer of dedication, and to adopt a mitigated negative declaration pursuant to CEQA. I think I covered all the bases there on the recommendation. And then, in addition, to add a condition to, that the applicant work with staff to provide a tot lot in an appropriate location, and then direction to explore providing deeper balconies if feasible for the one bedroom townhouse apartments.
And I will second that.
I have a second from Commissioner Khan. Discussion.
Yeah, I just, without hearing from the developer, I mean, I know we very quickly discussed the feasibility of the addition of the tot lot, and I think I would feel more comfortable with direction instead of a condition there. Just because I think that warrants a little bit more feasibility, and it might not be within the developer's control. So I just wanted to note that for your consideration as the motion maker.
A question on that. If we gave direction, would the City Council in the staff report know that we gave direction on that?
Yes. And, we will recount the conversation. We will include, what'll happen is Rachel will work closely with the development team. They'll explore the changes that are the direction that's being provided. We'll come to some agreement on, what's possible, what's best for the project, what's physically feasible to accomplish, and present those revisions to the City Council. So they will have the option to say, to evaluate that that issue. What we tried to do, obviously, with the city council, since that's the final approval, is not have any changes that the developer team can't understand and agree to in the moment. So I think this is a good process for us to work closely with them, provide certainty before we move forward to the city council. And there's time to do that with the city council hearing in January.
Good point. So I take it, starting with the second, Steve, you're happy, you're okay with the direction rather than the commandment?
I will support having a direction on the tot lot instead of a requirement.
Okay, and Mike?
I'd like to hear, I'd like to hear what the applicant has to say. I thought I heard the applicant say that they could accomplish that, but, and also I'd like to hear what staff's opinion is, whether they think a direction or a condition is more appropriate.
I kind of thought we just did, but
Yeah.
Rachel.
I think that direction is helpful because we can then work with the applicant in terms of the location. And in addition, having a condition where it says, a condition that says work with staff, I think can be challenging to implement. So I think the direction is pretty strong, as you saw with the direction from ARC, even in tonight's meeting, they provided a series of recommendations to you regarding changes to the architectural design. That would be similar, I think, with this tot lot, that there would be action by the applicant team to show how they can accomplish that. And if it's impossible for whatever reason, they would need to explain why they couldn't do that. So I think it's helpful going that direction.
Yeah, that's a good point. They have to, sorry, John, they have to explain, we have to explain to the city council why the direction wasn't followed, as opposed to coming back to the planning commission to explain why it wasn't followed.
Right.
This is John Young. We will work hard to make it work like we have in the past. So we'll roll up our sleeves and see what we can do to make it happen.
So, okay, I'll amend my original motion just to state that there should be direction for the applicant to work with staff on the location of a tot lot in an appropriate location. And also, I think I forgot to include in my motion the proposed language changes in the staff agenda correspondence that were proposed by the applicant, and all the other corrections that were in the staff report.
So
I will second that.
Go ahead.
I support the idea of asking the designers to look at perhaps deepening the balconies. I wouldn't restrict it just to the smallest units myself. The applicants seem very willing to look at possibilities, and it could become an architectural motif that sort of repeats itself through the project. So rather than just conditioning for the smallest units, why don't we ask them to explore the possibility in a more general way?
Oh, this is Commissioner Wilken. The reason I wanted to explain the rationale, the reason I suggested looking at deepening the balconies on the one-bedroom units is that all the other units have a minimum of 70 plus square feet of private open space, and I thought that was more than adequate. So that's the reason I just limited my my suggestion to the one-bedroom units with 38, the ones with 38 square feet of private open space.
I thought you were objecting to the 4 foot width, which is fairly narrow, 4'6", 5 feet, sometimes loosens up what you can do on the balcony. So
Count your briquettes.
Well, yeah, the objection was to the 4-foot depth, but if I'm not mistaken, the other units have deeper balconies. Maybe we can ask the applicant to respond if Chair wants to open it up again.
Sure. Mr. Young, you want to respond on that? Or can you, or maybe Brian?
Yeah, I'll jump in. On the balconies, I would have to go back in and look at those specifically. I do think that we have some pretty good sized balconies on the other units that are within the apartment homes that are on the ends. I can't remember the exact size, but I think it's fairly large. On the bungalow product that is kind of in the eastern portion of the site, there you have roughly 2/3 have backyards with 600 square feet or something like, I don't know the exact number. And then there's a carriage unit that has a fairly large balcony on it. So I would have to be honest with you, I'd have to spend some time studying it. I do think we can take a look at the 1 bedrooms as you've suggested, for sure, that we can look at that, as Brian had suggested, to do something with that. Do you have anything to add, Brian?
Yeah, commissioners, I think just for clarification, it is, as was stated earlier, it is correct that the smaller 1-bedroom homes have balconies that are 38 square feet, but then the rest of the homes have balconies that are more commensurate with the size of those homes. So other apartment homes have 72 and 100 square foot balconies, and then the bungalow homes, most of them are between 180 and 380 square feet of private open space. Some of them have balconies, some of them have ground floor patios that are much more significant. So we have about 36,000 square feet of private balcony area throughout the project. It's just distributed. Obviously, it's weighted towards the larger homes that do have the larger balconies.
Mike, do you have a clarification you need, or did you get was the response adequate from your point of view?
Yeah, it's fine with me. I think you might ask Commissioner Dandekar if she had any further concerns.
I think the designers have got the point that we want to look at the places where the balconies might be smaller and do the design response. And I'm okay with the language. It's you're containing it to the smaller units. I think if they want to be looking across, I was skimming through the designs. It's not always clear, at the scale I was looking. But in principle, I support Commissioner Wilkins' idea that the balconies be rendered more usable. And if the small ones are the ones that need attention only, that's fine. I would just suggest that the designers look at the conditions existing elsewhere just to.
So is there a question whether we're giving direction or we're?
I think direction, from my point of view, direction is adequate.
Mm-hmm. And Commissioner Wilkin.
Yes, I'm fine with the direction. I think I made that part of my motion.
I'd like to have us look in your motion at condition number 80, and I'm looking on page 54, item C. If we look at 54 in our packets, I can read it if you want. There's just a phrase I'd like to eliminate if I could. If you can find it on page 54, the pathway design shall endeavor to minimize potential encroachment into UPRR right of way. City Public Works Department is willing to support potential design exception requests to utilize reduced cross-section dimensions along the pathway in Bullock Lane. And the part that I don't like is the IE 8-foot bike path. i.e. meaning that is, and rather than say e.g. or something that's just optional. And then it goes on to 7-foot parking lanes or no on-street parking, 10-foot auto lanes. I'd like to just eliminate the phrase 8-foot bike path. And I'd like to change the IE to EG so that we're not all tied up. That sounds like that's the only thing that can be done. And it sounds like we're so committed to the 12-foot bike lane. I just like to strike the 8-foot option.
Commissioner Jorgensen, could you tell us what the page number is? I lost you.
Sorry, 50. It's on page 54.
And item
C.
Yeah, Chair Jorgensen, is there a way that staff can maybe put that language up on the screen so we can take a look at it?
Yep, I bet there is. It'll take a minute because we, have to figure out which staff is going to do it for that matter.
Hey, Rachel, John, I've got the reso open. I'm happy to share my screen unless one of you is already queued up to do it.
You go first. You beat me by 2 seconds. Go for it.
Chair Jorgensen, this is Deputy Clerk Christian. Just while Luke is getting that ready to go, I just wanted to suggest that with the additional back and forth with the applicant, that you may need to open this back up to public comment from anybody else in the audience after you've continued with this. Thank you.
I'll do that. Good point.
Okay, so the section the commissioner had mentioned is in condition 80, part C, which basically just articulates that depending on the final designs, there might be some design exceptions that would need to be considered. And the section you would request to strike out is you give some examples like narrowing to minimum parking lane widths, minimum auto lane widths, and minimum path widths. If the request is to strike out the section regarding an 8-foot bike path, I would be supportive of that as well.
I was also going to swap out the IE for an EG so that they would be examples as opposed to mandates. This sort of sounds like that's what would be done.
Yep.
You see what I'm trying to get at?
Commissioner Jorgensen, maybe it would be helpful just to read the version of that phrase exactly the way you want it so we can just write it down that way.
Sure. I'll start with the second sentence. That's the sentence that we're at. The City Public Works Department is willing to support potential design exception requests to utilize reduced cross-section dimensions along the pathway in Bullock Lane, e.g. 7-foot parking lane, parentheses, or no on-street parking lane, into parentheses, 10-foot auto lanes, comma, if needed to minimize UPRR encroachment and or to address other geometric constraints.
I think we wrote that down. I think we got it.
Ema, did you see it now?
Yeah, thank you.
So
the intent is just to take the bike path out of that equation.
Well, ideally, yes. Yes. And to make it examples rather than mandates.
Mm-hmm.
This is Commissioner Wilkin. I'll include that in my motion if staff doesn't have any objections.
And I will second the motion maker's change.
Staff comments other than Luke?
Yeah, I would like to hear from staff if they see this is going to be an impediment.
I'll defer to Luke if he has any questions about it, but I have no problem with that.
No, I'd be supportive as modified.
Well,
I'm ready to vote on this. I think
Yep.
it sounds good.
Good. Any other comments? Let's call the roll.
I'm sorry, this is Deputy Clerk Christian. as
Oh,
I
sorry.
suggested before.
Sorry. Let's stop there while we're deliberating and go back and open it up for public comment. Because we invited the applicants to respond to some questions. So, Kevin, are there any further comments from the public?
I don't see any at the moment. Let me just reiterate, if anybody in the attendee group would like to make a comment, you can do so by raising your virtual hand. I will then recognize you and promote you to a panelist. And we'll give you another 10 seconds. Seeing none, back to you, Chair Jorgensen.
Okay, so I'm ready to call the question, but are there any other comments or anything else? I can see you all right now. It's amazing. First time this has happened. Good. Kevin, would you call the roll then on this motion in second?
Commissioner Wilkin.
Yes.
Commissioner Khan.
Yes.
Commissioner Dondekar.
Yes.
Commissioner Hopkins.
Yes.
Chair Jorgensen.
Yes. Thank you.
Motion
So that
passes.
motion passes. So we have item 3B at 7:42. Do we want to take a break or should we just muscle through?
Well, considering that I'm going to be presenting on this one, give me 1 minute and I'll be ready to go with it.
A whole minute, all at the same time. My goodness. Let me just double check. So we're okay to keep moving and try to get through this? Sounds like we are. Let's do that. And before we get much further, I think Michael Hopkins had something to say.
Yes, thank you, Chair Jorgensen. Unfortunately, yet again, I will need to recuse myself on this item. I have a conflict of interest as my employer currently is in partnership to provide the affordable housing component of this project. Thank you.
The larger project. Got it. Okay. Well, we enjoyed having you anyhow for a while, Michael. So let's jump in. Are we ready then for the staff report? We still have a minute. We can.
You know what? I didn't really need the full minute. If you can go, I can go.
Okay. Well, John, you're on.
Okay. Well, it's convenient to do 2 in a row here.
Yeah. Well scheduled.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again, and I've got a presentation. See if I can pull this up. How does that look right there?
Very good.
Okay. Okay, so for this item, it's a return to the Agricultural Heritage and Learning Center at San Luis Ranch. It's the applicant is Coastal Community Builders, Jacob Grossman. And this is the component that includes the moving of the San Luis Ranch buildings and the building of the Ag Center. So let's go through the project a bit. We do have a good team, I think led by Scott Martin from RRM to present for the applicant when I'm done, but I'm going to focus on the regulatory aspects and let him focus on the project details. The recommendation on this one is to adopt the draft resolution, approving the project design, the development plan, and the addendum to the specific plan, final EIR, and supplemental final EIR based on the findings and subject to conditions of approval. A reminder of where we're at. The San Luis Ranch project, of course, is between the freeway and Madonna Road, and you see it starting to be built as we speak. This portion is the Ag Heritage Learning Center within the 53.5 acre ag zone within the 131 acre site. And it's within the specific plan that guides the San Luis Ranch specific plan that guides the land use, circulation, parks and open space, infrastructure, architecture and design. And so this project was contemplated in the San Luis Ranch specific plan. And what's shown here on this graphic actually is a graphic out of the plan, and conceptually that this is implementing a piece of that. This provides a little more depth to show how it relates to the rest of the project site. And so it's actually functionally a piece of the ag land and relates to the ag land and yet is across the street from a lot of the residents and right along Fern Ranch Way. So the project itself is part of that 53-acre ag site. As I said, part of the approved specific plan. It's designated and zoned ag. Under the plan, it's currently vacant, and it's surrounded by either agriculture or planned residential or planned hotel and retail use within the specific plan. So the project components. First, I'll talk about a few buildings. There are 5 main buildings totaling a little over 30,000 square feet. There'd be a farm market, a restaurant, a retail with historic barn. It's actually 2 buildings joined as one. There'd be some ag processing. And then there's a historic residence that's been moved, has already been moved. It would be, set into the project, and you see it out there on the site right now, moved from the San Luis Ranch site. There'd be interpretive and educational displays. There'd be ag accessory buildings and a community garden. Now, there's several project features that relate to historic resources. There's the adaptive reuse and rehabilitation of the main residence and the main barn, or called the hay barn, from the old San Luis Ranch site that was closer to Madonna Road. There's the remaining wall of the former spectators barn and viewing stand, which it's remaining because it's the only part that didn't get destroyed in the fire from a couple of years ago. It'd be positioned to overlook the former racetrack area where this site is located, actually. All the rehab work would be overseen by a qualified historic consultant, and the project would incorporate interpretive displays and exhibition area memorabilia and educational components. Just as a reminder, what that former San Luis Ranch complex had in it, there were 9 structures. The ones highlighted in red are the ones that have been moved already and would need to be integrated into the project. Those were the ones that were considered the most significant in the evaluation of that complex and why they are being moved to this project site. I'll let the applicants talk about this in more depth, but these are really where they would be located in the context of the overall development, which is to say, sort of toward the one side, the edge of the property where the ag continues to be contemplated on the San Luis Ranch site. This provides maybe a little better overview of how the entire project would relate and how it would, how those historic structures are integrated. Won't go into much depth here, and I'm sure Scott will wax rhapsodic on that. There is the historic residence and rehab, and this gives you an idea of what that would look like. I know he's going to talk a little bit about the paint color being a little different than this, and there's a good reason for that, but this gives you an idea of how the rehabilitation would look. This is the fire damage racetrack grandstand wall right now, and this would be integrated in almost as a display, put in a place where it can be seen, interpreted, and then some context provided for what it was. And so it has an educational component as well. This is how the barn and grandstand relate to one another once moved and put in place. You can see how the remnant of the grandstand actually almost acts like a visual gateway to the rest of the ag that will continue to be on the site. So let's talk a little about the previous advisory body review. ARC heard this a little over a month ago, or about a month ago, a little over a month ago, and so did Cultural Heritage Committee. Now, notably, both of them unanimously recommended approval without any further direction or conditions from what was proposed. I would call it an enthusiastic recommendation. The consistency with city regulations. Well, again, as I said, the San Luis Ranch specific plan is consistent with the general plan. And so the consistency with that plan is the benchmark. And this project is explicitly something that was contemplated in there. In effect, what they're doing is following the cookbook of what the specific plan said, pretty much to a T. It does talk about the ag development standards, sign requirements, what you'd put in this facility, and so forth. And that is exactly what they're doing. There's also in the neighborhood form of the specific plan, it talks a bit about how this relates to the rest of the project and so on and so forth. So again, it's following what the specific plan says pretty much verbatim. There's also issues related to building height and setbacks, and it's consistent with what's in the specific plan. It's consistent with the intent of the community design guidelines, something that ARC looked at in some depth. The signage concept appears consistent. The city staff will review a formal sign program once the project starts taking shape. And the plant palette is generally consistent. Not all plants are on the San Luis Ranch specific plant list, but those that are not are consistent with the idea of drought tolerant native plant landscaping. So from staff's perspective, seem consistent. Then there's a whole series of historic related policies in the specific plan. And that's what the integration of the historic structures are intended to do, including the archival documentation of what was there, informational displays, including in the project design to provide more context for the community in general. It also, the idea of moving them and rehabilitating addresses a safety issue. But if they were to have been left where they were, they would have continued to be a safety issue. And that's one reason, for example, why the fire occurred, likely related to homeless population and a fire that was set to keep them warm. So this addresses some safety concerns. And again, the idea here is to protect key structures and provide a historic evaluation. The Cultural Heritage Committee looked in depth at this, including different standards, the SOI standards that apply to the project, and the consistency with those, and found that the idea of doing this was consistent. As I said, the structural safety was an issue. The rehabilitation and proposed use reflects the ag character and provides education. And the fire damaged grandstand can be used as an educational feature. So this really became an opportunity from CHC's perspective. And so that was one of the reasons they had the support that they did. So in terms of CEQA compliance, there was a final EIR for this, certified back in July 2017, which covered the entire San Luis Ranch site. And in that, notably, it identified a significant unavoidable impact related to historic resources. And notably, it included a series of mitigation measures which provided guidance about relocating archival documentation and informational displays, which is exactly what this project is doing. And so the CHC agenda report, which you have as an attachment, describes the post-fire approach to implementing the required mitigation measures. So that's all being implemented. There's also an EIR addendum, and that addendum, which does not have to be publicly circulated because it didn't identify any new impacts or any mitigation measures. It just provided new information. It really just provided the updated information regarding the historic significance of the grandstand structure, which actually wasn't discussed in those historic terms in the final EIR. And by the way, for that reason, that grandstand structure, once that evaluation was done, was going to be integrated in a more comprehensive way. The fire changed how that was going to be integrated, but what remains will still be integrated. And then ultimately, as I said, the addendum is not required to be circulated. It's there for information for your consideration. And so we go back to the recommendation to adopt the draft resolution, approving the project design and addendum to the specific plan final EIR and supplemental final EIR. And with that, I'll hand it back to the commission, and just be aware that the applicant team does have a presentation they're ready to make at any time. Thank you.
Are there questions of John? I'm not seeing anyone ready to go. Mike, you're muted, I think.
Thank you, Chair Jorgensen. I have one question. I noticed that there's some sign standards in the San Luis Ranch specific plan, and that the sign proposal is different than what's shown in the specific plan. And I just wanted to confirm that with a sign program, you're able to deviate from the standards in the specific plan. Is that correct?
That's correct. The idea being that, if it meets the intent of the specific plan, there's a little bit of wiggle room to make that work.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Just following up on that, I noticed from time to time it's called San Luis Ranch and other times Slow Ranch, which doesn't work as well for me. I like the San Luis Ranch. Are we trying to do both?
I think officially it's the San Luis Ranch specific plan. And it's hard to keep
But-
slow out of your mouth at times.
Well, but there's a sign in the report here that says
Okay.
Slow Ranch, and it seemed out of place. Oh, well.
We'll make a note of that. Sure.
So other questions of staff? I don't see anyone. And so let's move on to the presentation from the applicants. Welcome.
I've just promoted Scott Martin. Mr. Martin, once you are up and running, if you want to let me know if there's anybody else from your team that you would like to have promoted, I will do that. And then with that, just a reminder of your 10-minute presentation time, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Commissioners. Chair Jorgensen, thank you for the opportunity. I think it probably would be good just to promote as panelist Jacob Grossman, representing the applicant. I'm hoping I could cover any other questions. You threw me not having any questions for John Rickenbach there, so I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to need, but I'll do my best to do that. There's always this subtle sort of 10-second delay between getting an attendee and a panelist. I never know what really happens there. So, Commission, really thank you again for dealing with what is just a trying time. So going through this digital review and being willing and still dedicated through all these times, so amazing to see. So thank you all. Bear with me as I'm much more animated and like to do this in person, but will do my best to do this digitally. I think I actually get the power tonight to share my screen. So I want to make sure that is happening and everybody's able to see my presentation. Is a thumbs up, maybe. I'm an architect, so I actually like to move things around and even draw and do other things. So I'm going to keep it in sort of a PDF format. It also allows me to flip back and forth to the plans if I need to. I will try to be very respectful of your time, though. I know you all put in more time than any of us could ever ask and getting late. So I will try to stick to the 10 minutes. Thank you for hearing our item tonight. A quick agenda for the applicant's presentation. We're going to go over the site plan overview, touch briefly on specific plan conformance, although I thought city staff did a fabulous job of that. A little more detail on circulation, some questions that have come up at public hearings so far. Get a little taste of the building design. That alone could go an hour, so I don't want to take up too much there. Touch upon our landscape concept. Parking was another topic brought up through the hearing, so I just want to discuss those and then talk about next steps or where we go from here. So I hope you've all had a chance to look at this. I will say it is, definitely not the first time this project in some form has been here to the Planning Commission. So those of you who were part of the specific plan process, I will appreciate that longevity and try to build upon that. It's been a pleasure myself having both that early planning knowledge and actually being here with an architectural plan and development plan for you today. I think staff did a great job of sort of denoting the general location. There's some contextual issues I just wanted to highlight quickly. There is a hotel in development next door. I think that starts to set the sort of transitional opportunities from the existing established retail, the future planned retail, and then the residential development, the single family homes and the multifamily homes that are both under construction and in development now. I think this commission has seen already. Once you really arrive, this is Froome Ranch Way and sort of clearly seen as the arrival opportunity. Once arriving to the site, we thought it was really important not only how we faced and engaged the public, what you could see from some very prominent views around the project, but then how you could experience the project once within it. So the site plan focuses on trying hard to grasp on to the agricultural heritage, to grasp on to the setting. It is part of with the ag land around, reflect back on its history. We'll talk a little bit more about that juxtaposition between those historic structures, but also sort of help with that transition from a commercial site into a more of a neighborhood specialty arrangement. So when we look at the site plan and the location of things like the restaurant building, the market building, those were really the scale and proportion where we wanted to greet people. We thought putting the historic house, the wood house, if you will, out sort of on a peninsula helped really give it pertinence and presence that was reflective of its past. I think John talked a little bit about its connection to the other historic elements. And then the larger buildings, the ag processing and the retail, really reflecting back to where they're coming from. The idea here is almost a farm to table concept, that there is agriculture being produced and then used in these buildings. And we'll get a little bit more into that dialogue and how that actually works. As I said, this is, I think, the 8th hearing that this project has been seen in some sort just at the Planning Commission. We are, as John said, 100% in conformance. We're not asking for any variances, any exceptions. We are excited about the opportunity to bring a commercial center with some very distinct uses. This idea of actually the maker space where you see the great produce and the agricultural means that is generated in this county being produced and then bought and sold all in one place. The idea of the cheese being made and sold at the creamery, the organic foods, even a distillery where you actually get some of that production. We're very excited about. Everything is within the specific plan, allowed use and sort of designated square footages, the market, the farm stand, the restaurant itself. So we're very proud to sort of build upon the legwork that was already done and provide the project that the community helped envision the whole time. From a circulation standpoint, there are some unique characteristics here. It is along a new circulation path from Ranch Way in San Luis Obispo that does bring vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic, and bike traffic. The whole purpose of the multimodal approach that was set forth in San Luis Ranch specific plan, and I apologize for the both SLO and San Luis Ranch. I think that is just an abbreviation. It was really focused around that multimodal approach. So neighborhood commercial, being able to walk to a center, community gardens and community plots, HOA maintained, and actual plots that the retail and restaurant could use themselves. But that circulation becomes really important. Right front and center, we really wanted to provide pedestrian and bike access. So there is short-term bike parking, pedestrian connectivity back to the community through a series of crosswalks and traffic calming devices. There are public bus stops located just off the page here, but that's what those denote. The pedestrian, as it comes in, gets the ability to sort of filter through the site. There's short-term bike parking up front. There's long-term bike parking in back by the restrooms and inside the hay barn. The parking lot, the vehicular parking lot, is sort of segmented into two segments with the ability for some electrical vehicle parking. In fact, we've actually got quite a bit of EV-ready parking as well. And there's a series of varying material types, pervious pavers to allow just a real different textural variety on the ground plane and really sort of focus that pedestrian experience back into the project, into the pedestrian realm, if you will. You'll note only 3 of the buildings even have frontage out to there. This is really about sort of a project that you discover as you wander through the site. From a building design standpoint, we took our cues from the historic Delilio property and Wood Ranch. what we really wanted to do though was distinguish what was new and old, and that became sort of an architectural theme. I think there's an agrarian sort of nod to architectural vernacular that has sort of had a resurgence in the last couple of decades. And to do that in a way where you could clearly identify both new and historic structures became a bit of a dance, and we think a happy one. As we worked through with our historian, our Paula Carr helped with the historic aspect of the structures that were being relocated, and then the definition of the new to be complementary yet not dilute the quality of what was originally there. Working within the height limit, like I said, no variations, but trying to provide some volume and some outdoor space that everybody in the retail world is highly looking for right now. And really a sense of discovery and learning throughout the project. Whether you start at the historic house or wander back to the agricultural production, this is really an opportunity to see how product is taken from the land and becomes a packaged good or a beverage you drink or something like that. So it's really the type of place that we could see a family spending all day at, and really not only learning a bit about the history of San Luis and the history of our agricultural production, but the future of what that means and how that actually becomes product. So we're excited about that. It's very outdoor geared. There is quite good visibility from the freeway. If you've driven by now, you've probably seen the historic structures that are already out there. We think this becomes a sort of threshold into town, and the positioning within the specific plan of a large agricultural crop, and then the backdrop of the buildings became important. And it was important for us to know that not only were the buildings there, but there was something else. There was something inside. There was a place, an experience that you wanted to see. So we're excited about that interior space. I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. But it sort of interweaves itself, and we think it's going to become a great sort of beacon to Southern San Luis. Regarding the historic structures, I don't know if anybody had a chance to see CHC, but it was a great debate. It was a great dialogue and a great conversation. We had sort of a couple aha moments as we were working with these structures. The easiest one, and maybe I'll go back and forth a little bit here, was the historic home. We find more and more about this every day, but we have quite a great catalog and reference of historic photos. Originally, it was thought, John mentioned this, that it was lighter in color. That's this yellow color you'll see up here. Just in the last 3 or 4 months, we have found a photo that actually showed this almost burnt red color on the historic home. So we've already talked to Architectural Review and CHC about how to incorporate that. But we're really excited about the opportunity here, setting the tone with the historic wood residents. It'll be open, it'll have public access. It is the home itself that becomes the historic opportunity. There's some beautiful woodworking, some architectural features on the interior of the home. There will be exhibits designed by SWCA. It's funded and maintained by the ownership group. So really quite a wonderful opportunity to relate back to the history of this site. Directly adjacent to that is what's known as the hay barn, and then the burnt wall. And John did a great job discussing these. You know, it was shocking when we all found out that the old viewing barn had been set on fire, and what to do now, as it was sort of an anchor piece of the project. We like the hay barn. We find it, the materials to be reused. We're going to have to rebuild the structure. It's not sustainable the way it is, but to reclad a portion of the building in that material. And then we use sort of an interesting architectural folly here. We created a new, more modern element that then related back to a new piece of the building, and of a new building. And this became a way for the whole project to really engage this historic structure that otherwise may have just been something you use or you look at. This actually now becomes something you use. Working with the historian, we even loved the idea, it looked like there may have been animal pens or stalls in the hay barn. We're now using it for some of our restroom stalls. We're creating some retail space that'll allow some filtered light and some of the natural elements that are so indicative of the hay barn to come back through.
Scott, this is Deputy Clerk Christian. I just wanted to let you know that your 10 minutes is up, and if you could wrap up in the next couple minutes, that would be great. Thanks.
No problem. I think I've got 2 left, so thank you so much. The grandstand wall became, something special, something we wanted to highlight and stand off of the existing buildings, set in the landscape, referencing back to the historical racetrack. There is, like I said, there's a long story there that I could take up the rest of my time, but I do want to note some of the landscape features. We are using some fruiting trees, and many of the plants called out within the specific plan. There are a couple swapped out for drought tolerance and acclimation to purple pipe and recycled water. So we did make some edits, but I think it's still in keeping with the theme and the concept. And we hope create some really great interior spaces. We had to worry about wind and solar access here, but we think there's going to be both some wonderful interior spaces as well as exterior. Finally, I wanted to touch upon some of the parking requirements. This is intended for produce use, and it's slightly overparked. Part of that has to do with the anticipation of higher vehicles for different uses. Not only employee parking, as there are actual functional facilities here, but also guests, retail merchants and vendors, heavy produce, bike and pedestrian is our focus. I think you'll see that when you look through some of the stats, but there is a need for actual vehicles. So I apologize to rush through the last couple there, but I'm happy to answer any questions or provide further detail as the commission would like.
Thank you for that, Scott. Questions from commissioners?
I have a question.
Please.
On circulation, there's a road that's sketched in towards the freeway that comes up over by the Mercedes and BMW dealer, and then pops up and seems to go by the side of this project and by the side of the hotel. Can you kind of show me where that's going to connect with the big, go to that slide that shows the whole area, all of the development?
I think this is what Commissioner Khan, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is, I lost my cursor. There we go. This is the freeway.
Right.
Here is the project site. There is a city farm sort of in this area. Does that help answer? I guess I'm not 100% sure.
Isn't there a road that comes by the BMW dealer that comes all the way through the site and comes over here to Delidio?
So what happens now is this comes up here to City Farm, and then Froome Ranch Way is the connector piece.
No, we're looking, I think Commissioner Khan's looking on page 154 of our packets.
Yeah.
Looking at what could be a drainage, perhaps a drainage.
What is that line on the drawing over there to the south of, or towards the freeway from the hotel site? What is that?
Sure. I think I heard road and I misinterpreted what you were saying. What you're looking at is this here, which is a potential future dedication for on-ramp, off-ramp activities. So there is nothing currently planned. As I mentioned, here the dealership is just south of here. This is the end of the road. This is sort of where the city farm comes. And this does, you can see, this will come up, and this is Froome Ranch Way. This is all in a no-build area for whatever happens with the overpass in the future.
So this will be an interchange on-ramp for US 101 someday in the future.
That is what's envisioned as part of the long-term circulation
Yeah.
plan. I think it's
Excellent.
been
Thank you for that
challenged.
clarification. On that interchange, I'm a big supporter of building all on and off ramps for it. And I'm kind of surprised they're not doing the southbound ramps. That's a whole separate story. Okay, that was my question. You've answered it. Thank you.
No problem.
Other questions?
I have one question.
Yeah, Mr. Mike, welcome.
Yes. There's a policy 2.5 in the San Luis Ranch specific plan that talks about protecting the water tower. And then also somewhere in the agenda materials, and I don't remember where now, I thought I saw a reference to a windmill. In fact, there's a windmill in that rendering that's up on the screen right now. So I was wondering what the status of those two structures is. Are they protected somehow, moved to another site, or is the windmill going to be moved to this site?
Great question. And John, I may lean on you a little bit for 2.5 as I do not have the full specific plan in front of me. My understanding, this is intended to be a new windmill, not a relocated. It is not one of the historically relocated, but we did think it was in keeping with the architectural theming. So this is not an existing to be relocated or recreated. There's very high standards that are met for the Secretary of Interior for any of those relocated buildings. I apologize, commissioners. I just don't have policy 2.5 in front of me. So
let me help you there, Scott. So
thank you, John.
Commissioner Wolkin, I just want to make sure I understand where in the plan you're seeing 2.5, because I'm looking at the plan right here, and I may just not be looking in the right place. Do you have a spot where you're finding that?
I'm sorry, I don't have a page reference. Maybe I have the wrong policy number, but essentially it says, maybe in the staff report, it says protect the water tower, essentially, is among other things. There's other things in that policy, but one of the statements is protect the water tower. So I was just wondering, has that been protected somehow?
While I'm looking, I will endeavor to answer your question, but we can move on and I'll come back to that in about a minute.
Okay, so those were my questions, and also what happened to the windmill, if there was a windmill.
This might take me a second, but I not quite there yet.
Well, if you want to move on, Mr. Chair, to other questions, that's fine. Might save some time.
Are there other commissioners with questions?
Quite the stumper, Commissioner Wolkin. Well done.
Well, we'll come back to it in deliberations if we can find it.
Yeah.
So let me open the hearing to public comment. Kevin, could you check to see if anyone has raised their hand?
Sure. Just a reminder to anybody in the attendee audience, if you would wish to comment on this item, go ahead and raise your virtual hand and I will then promote you to a panelist and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Well, nobody at this point has raised their hand. Let's give them a few more seconds just in case. All right, seeing none.
Okay. I'll bring it back to the commission. Are we still stumped or we can?
Well, here we go. I'm going to unstump myself right here. So this is a reference in the implementation section of the San Luis Ranch specific plan, where it talks about under section 8.1.2, there's various goals and policies that are referenced in here. Now, when I'm looking at it, I'm seeing under here a reference to a policy 2.5, which or implementation number. Yeah, it's or policy 2.5, I guess. Protect associated structures such as the Toledo home, Laguna Racetrack Viewing Barn, and then it talks about the windmill. Now, or the water tower, I'm sorry. I don't know what the water tower is offhand. Now I can tell you this, it's possible that this section was one of the last ones that was edited. It's possible this is a remnant that from an earlier draft, but I'll look at this. I think the intent though, for any policy in here is to protect the historic structures. And then it talks about the idea of the Delidio home, the racetrack, the stand barn, and the water tower. Scott may know if there was ever a water tower associated with the San Luis Ranch complex or not. But again, I'll do a little more research in how this is in here and how it relates. Because when you look at the rest of the specific plan, there is no such policy elsewhere in the plan. There's an implementation catch-all that includes a lot of goals and policies, and this may have been an earlier iteration of the plan. I'll have to figure that out.
John, I think Jacob may have some insight into this. That there's been a lot of historic documentation. I know the EIR policies were heavily focused on the three structures we covered tonight. So, Jacob, I see your hand raised. Is it that you have some insight to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to read what you just said, that the EIR mitigation measures, CR1A, focus on the wood residence, the hay barn, and the grandstand viewing wall. There was no water tower in the original Delidio complex. However, we are doing a water tower replicant above the common area bathrooms below the restaurant. It's not really seen on the rendering, but it's in the plans. And the same with the windmill. The windmill is an homage to the earlier barn days.
So, Mike, does that help with your question?
Yeah, that answers my questions.
Okay. Thank you. A little sleuthing going on here. So, are we ready to deliberate? Let's do it. Would someone like to start with a motion? Is everyone still awake?
Yeah. I'd like to make the motion to approve this project. I'm trying to find the verbiage in our agenda package, and it sounded like good verbiage to me. I think this, yeah. So I'd like to make the motion to approve this project, and I will find the agenda alpha. And can somebody help me with
I can help
page?
you. I will second her motion to draft to adopt the draft resolution approving the design, to amend the specific plan final EIR and supplemental final EIR based on fundings and subject to the attached conditions of approval.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's on page 153. Good. So we have a motion from Commissioner Danicar and a second from Commissioner Khan. Discussion.
I can add one thing. If you want to just be explicit in your motion that you're referring to the resolution, which does include all the conditions that are in there, that ties it all together that way. And I think in the staff report at the beginning, it sort of lays out potential wording you could use.
Yeah.
To adopt the resolution.
Draft resolution, exactly. We'll assume the motion does that.
Yes, the motion does that. There are so many resolutions from architecture review, cultural heritage, etc., that I was getting a little. But yes, we should include the resolution as it stands, as recommended by staff.
I think potentially this is just a very exciting project, more interesting, and I think going to be more popular than what I first imagined. But I'm glad to see the historical pieces.
Kind of similar to the Avila Ranch, Avila Barn.
Yeah, Avila Barn.
Kind of feel.
North, I guess we'll call it, huh?
Yeah.
Well, having been present at all of the 8 Planning Commission presentations of the different phases of this project, for me, it's very exciting to see what what the developer team and the design team has done. It actually exceeds what I was hoping for in many ways, because there wasn't that much artifact to work with in the agricultural buildings on the site. So I think the way that they have augmented what there was and created a agrarian style that's going to really meet the needs of contemporary slow residents for both entertainment as well as education, I think it's been extremely well done. I'm very happy with what I saw with this piece of the project. And it's got to be good publicity for the city. We talked at length when we did the hotel component about how we wanted the hotel to connect and interface with this yet unknown piece of the project. And I think we were wise to do that, because there's something quite exciting here to connect to. And it'll be a really great billboard for the city moving forward.
Maybe the hotel should be designed like an old Western hotel.
Too late for that, Steve. We
I
missed our
know,
chance
I
there.
know. Just trying to cause trouble.
Or it could be, interesting. So do I see any comments? I think we're going to vote then. I think we're ready. Let's have a roll call vote. Kevin?
Commissioner Dondekar,
Yes.
Commissioner Khan,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolken,
Yes.
Chair Jorgensen.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Passes perfectly. Thank you very much. Good presentation.
Thank you.
Here's Commissioner Hopkins back alive. So we're ready, I think, for a staff update of agenda forecast from Tyler.
All right. Well, thank you, Chair Jorgensen, commissioners. We got 2 meetings left to finish out the calendar year here. We got next meeting scheduled for November 17th and currently have 2 items. First one is the 600 tank farm project. And so this is the project down near the corner there of Broad and Tank Farm as you head towards Santa Fe. It would be a recommendation from the Planning Commission to City Council. It includes a variety of entitlements and a final EIR as well. It includes about 12,500 square feet of commercial, along with, and I don't have the number right here in front of me, but it does contain, oh, I do have it here, about 280 residential units. So pretty large mixed use project there. It kind of fits in with some of the other recent projects that have been reviewed by the Planning Commission, both at the corner and adjacent to. So this is kind of the third one over from the from Broad Street. And then the second item is a 3-story mixed-use project. It's at 2800 Broad Street, and this includes 20 residential units and about 7,800 square feet of commercial. And that one's coming to you with a recommendation from the Architecture Review Commission. And then the final meeting of the year is on December 8th. And we have one item on the agenda at this time. It's 55 Broad Street. And this is an expansion of an existing residential care facility. It's the Villages over off of Broad. And it includes 2 new 3-story structures with 59 new rooms at that location. And so that will also be coming to you with a recommendation from the Architecture Review Commission. So that rounds out the last 2 meetings of the year. The next meeting in January will be our second meeting. So we won't have one, on the second Wednesday. It'll be the 4th.
4th Wednesday. So that's going to be the, looks like the 26th.
Sounds right. Yeah.
I potentially have a conflict on the November meeting, so I may not be at the November meeting.
Okay. Good to know. By the way, I can't resist saying, and I don't know if Tyler has sent this off to others of you, but tomorrow the mayor holds a session with the advisory bodies and the chairs of them. So I'm going, but Tyler did all the work, and we looked at the he looked at the major accomplishments from July through September. And one of the things that happened is we approved 397 housing units. And then upcoming ahead, let's see, that was in the earlier period, and this last upcoming issues, October to December, we've got 392 units. So we're busy. I was going to suggest we should get paid by the unit. Good luck with that. Okay, thank you, Tyler. I think we're good. And
Chair Jorgensen,
yes.
I have one question for staff.
Yeah.
I was wondering when the staff might give us a presentation on that complaint
SB9.
about the offsite tree removal up on Serrano.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. I don't have any further update for the commission yet on that one. It is being handled by the police department in terms of their investigation. So that's ongoing at this time. But I do have that on my list, and it is something that when we do have an update that, I can share, I will do that. But we are still working through the issues of the tree removals and any, trespassing and other, accusations that might have happened on that property.
And at some point, SB 9 and 10 around single family.
That was my point.
We
were going to get an update on that.
Absolutely. And staff is right now, we're hoping to have a draft memo for internal review next week. Our goal is to have, those questions generally answered to share with the council before their or at their November, 16th meeting. And so I will definitely be able to share that with Planning Commission at our next meeting on November 17th.
Good to hear. Great. Well, 8:33. So we did fairly well tonight. We're all awake and we did a good job. So I think I'm ready to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.